Imagine this, you're sitting in your small Brooklyn apartment paying nearly $3,000 a month for rent. The walls feel tighter each year, and even with decades of hard work, you wonder if retirement will ever be more than just bills, doctor visits, and a stack of pharmacy receipts. Now picture the same $3,000 buying you a three-bedroom home with a garden in Kigali, or Accra fresh mangoes delivered from the market each morning, and evenings filled with music that reminds you of a time when community truly meant something. This is not a vacation dream. It's not a fantasy commercial selling sunshine. It's real, and it's happening right now. Thousands of African Americans are packing up, saying goodbye to the so-called American dream and stepping into something that feels bigger, deeper, and far more liberating: the African dream. For centuries, African Americans were cut off from their roots, forced to build a life in a land that often treated their very existence as a burden. The silent stress, the invisible tax of every sideways glance or unfair rejection has left generations exhausted. But here comes the twist: instead of waiting for a broken system to fix itself, many are making the most radical move of all, leaving. Not in chains this time, but in choice. And this raises the question we all must ask: if the American dream no longer delivers dignity, is it time to seek it somewhere else? Could it be that the future of Black America is not in New York or Atlanta, but in Accra, Nairobi, or Ouagadougou, side by side, with a continent rising on its own terms? Stay with us, because what you are about to hear will challenge not only your understanding of America, but also of Africa. And if this conversation speaks to your heart, please share this video and subscribe, because truth is always stronger when we face it together. To understand this migration wave, we must first confront the everyday reality of being Black in America. It is not only about wages or opportunity. It is about the constant weight of suspicion, the invisible tax that never shows up on pay stubs but presses down on shoulders all the same. Every sideways glance from a store clerk, every random traffic stop that could escalate into something far worse. Every job application sent into silence because of a name that doesn't fit the recruiter's comfort zone. This constant pressure builds year after year, generation after generation. It becomes a form of mental fatigue, a pressure cooker that eventually explodes into burnout. For many African Americans, the math is straightforward: why stay in a country where the system is stacked against you when you can build a life where your skin is not automatically read as a red flag? The decision to leave, then, is not surrender. It is not defeat. It is survival. It is preservation. It is hope in motion. People are not leaving America because they have given up on themselves. They are leaving because they refuse to give up on their dignity. Think of the broader historical picture. For centuries, African Americans were forced into a life separated from their family trees. Entire branches of history were cut away, languages silenced, names erased. That loss was carried like a scar across generations. Fast forward to today, and DNA tests have become something like ancestral GPS devices, pointing individuals back towards Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, and beyond. What was once erased is now mapped. What was silenced is now speaking again. This is why initiatives like Ghana's Year of Return in 2019 were not mere tourist campaigns. They were spiritual reunions. More than 1 million people traveled, many for the first time, to walk through the door of no return. That door, once a symbol of final separation, became instead a doorway home. The symbolism was not abstract, it was lived. Standing there, many felt that the fracture of history had been healed, if only for a moment. But migration is never just about spirit. Belonging is powerful, yes, but belonging alone does not put food on the table. What makes this movement different is that it is reinforced by real-world opportunity. Africa today is no longer the caricature shown in Western headlines. Cities like Lagos, Nairobi, Kigali, Accra, and Dar es Salaam are no longer sleepy backwaters. They are dynamic hubs of technology, fashion, finance, and music. They are startup playgrounds where innovation is happening faster than the old global centers want to admit. For African Americans who are tired of glass ceilings, corporate gatekeepers, and the slow grind of an economy where every step forward feels like a battle, Africa presents an open field. The barriers are lower. The hunger of the market is higher. And the governments of nations such as Ghana and Rwanda are not only aware of this, but are actively encouraging it. With incentives like streamlined visas, tax holidays, and land grants, they are essentially saying, "Come home, build here." Your skills and networks are wanted, not feared. In short, what began as a personal act of self-preservation is transforming into something collective, almost revolutionary. Thousands are not only leaving America, they are rejoining a continent in motion. They are trading stress for possibility, suspicion for welcome, fatigue for renewal. The main event is not merely departure. It is the rediscovery of choice, something denied to their ancestors but embraced today. This is the heartbeat of the new migration. It is not about escaping. It is about arriving. It is about claiming space in a story that was interrupted centuries ago. Every story of migration has a turning point, a moment when the decision shifts from abstract to undeniable. For African Americans returning to Africa, that climax often comes at the collision between history and present reality. Imagine walking through Ghana's Elmina Castle, standing before the door of no return. For centuries, that archway represented a final goodbye, millions of lives forced onto ships, never to see their homeland again. But in 2019, during Ghana's Year of Return, something remarkable happened. More than 1 million people came not as captives, but as guests, pilgrims, and long-lost family. Standing in that doorway, many described a spiritual release. The door once marked an ending. Now it became a beginning. It was renamed in hearts and minds as the Door of Return. The reactions were visceral. People wept. Some collapsed to their knees. Others sang. For the first time, descendants of the enslaved were not looking out at the Atlantic as a place of loss, but looking inward to Africa as a place of belonging. That reversal of meaning, the trauma of departure becoming the triumph of return, was not symbolic fluff. It was history looping back on itself in real time. But the climax is not confined to emotional homecomings. It also emerges in everyday encounters. Ask returnees what strikes them most, and they rarely speak first of money or housing. They speak of greetings at the market, of being invited to meals without anyone asking what job they hold, of children calling them auntie or uncle with no hesitation. For people who spent decades being the only one in classrooms, offices, or boardrooms, this sudden sense of community is revolutionary. The smallest details, sharing food, hearing rhythms that echo childhood lullabies, become thunderclaps of recognition. It is as if their DNA exhales and whispers, "Finally, we are home." Governments across Africa have not missed this wave of energy. Ghana, Rwanda, and Senegal, often mentioned in diaspora programs, have moved beyond rhetoric to strategy. They understand that returnees are not charity cases. They bring capital, skills, and international networks. They can start businesses, create jobs, and connect markets that were once oceans apart. In response, policies have multiplied tax holidays, expedited residency land grants, and investment partnerships. These are not tokens of welcome, they are instruments of national development. The reaction from African states is pragmatic, but also deeply symbolic. For centuries, the continent was drained, its people taken, its resources extracted. Now, with the diaspora returning, the equation is changing. The brain drain is reversing. Doctors, engineers, creatives, and teachers are flowing back in. Every flight that lands is not only bringing luggage, it is bringing knowledge, ambition, and a kind of loyalty that cannot be manufactured. On the ground, the local reactions are complex but often profoundly welcoming. Communities see returnees not as outsiders but as lost relatives. Of course, adjustments are needed. Cultural differences exist, and sometimes expectations clash. But overall, the atmosphere is one of recognition rather than rejection. A farmer in Ghana put it simply to a visiting returnee: "You are not a stranger here. You are our brother who was stolen." The climax of this story, then, is both personal and political. It is the emotional release of rediscovering identity, combined with the structural response of governments eager to integrate returnees into their growth strategies. The personal sense of healing collides with national ambition, producing something larger than either could achieve alone. And the global reaction: quiet unease. In Washington, Paris, and London, policymakers notice. Every skilled professional who leaves the US or Europe for Africa is not just another migrant. They are a walking indictment of the societies they left behind. They are proof that opportunity no longer flows in only one direction. This is the heart of the climax. The return is not simply about leaving behind struggle. It is about rewriting the script of history. Where there was loss, there is renewal. Where there was exile, there is embrace. Where there was silence, there is song. When thousands of people begin to move in the same direction, it is never just a private choice. It becomes a social current, a civil phenomenon, and eventually a political question. The return migration of African Americans to Africa is no exception. Its consequences ripple through families, communities, and even the political fabric of nations on both sides of the Atlantic. On a civil level, the immediate consequence is transformation of daily life. Returnees bring with them not only their belongings but also the cultural codes they have carried in America, discipline networks, entrepreneurial skills, and in many cases financial resources. Local communities, once cautious, are discovering that the arrival of diaspora neighbors can be a catalyst for new schools, clinics, or small businesses. In Ghana and Rwanda, returnees have launched tech startups, community farms, and even art collectives that bridge African traditions with African American creativity. The result is not just economic development, but also cultural fusion, a richer, more layered identity within the community. Housing and land are also affected. The influx of diaspora families sparks debates about urban planning, rural land distribution, and housing markets. In cities like Accra and Kigali, demand for new housing has grown, sometimes straining local resources, but also creating opportunities for construction industries and job creation. Governments must now balance affordability for locals with the benefits of attracting diaspora capital. In this way, the return migration pushes African states to modernize policies once ignored. Politically, the implications run deeper. Every person who leaves the United States for Africa is making an unspoken political statement. It is a critique of systemic inequality in America and a vote of confidence in Africa's capacity to offer dignity and opportunity. African leaders are keenly aware of this symbolism. By rolling out the red carpet through visas, tax breaks, or symbolic ceremonies, they position themselves as not just national leaders, but continental hosts. The returnees are not framed as foreigners, but as family finally coming home. This shift has political consequences at the continental level. It strengthens Pan-Africanism not as an abstract philosophy, but as lived reality. When African Americans stand side by side with Ghanaians, Rwandans, or Senegalese, the idea of a united Africa gains flesh and bone. Governments find themselves pushed toward regional cooperation as diaspora investments often spill across borders. An IT startup in Accra may collaborate with developers in Nairobi. A cultural festival in Dakar might host African American performers alongside local artists. These bonds create pressure for harmonized policies, smoother travel, and eventually stronger continental integration. For the United States, the civil and political consequences are equally sharp. Each departure represents lost talent, lost entrepreneurship, and lost trust. When teachers, engineers, or retirees conclude that their dignity is safer abroad, it sends a silent alarm to policymakers. America is losing not only its citizens, but also its reputation as the land of opportunity. Meanwhile, within African civil societies, the return migration stirs debate. Some locals fear rising costs of living or cultural clashes, while others see only opportunity. Activists and youth movements argue that welcoming the diaspora must go hand in hand with improving conditions for citizens who never left. This debate forces governments to broaden their social agenda so that the benefits of return are shared widely, not concentrated among elites. In the end, the civil and political consequences of this movement are transformative. Communities are remade, policies rewritten, and identities expanded. What began as personal escape is becoming structural change. The ripple effects touch schools, housing, political alliances, and even the image of Africa itself. The return migration is no longer just a human story. It is a civic and political force reshaping two continents at once. To view this return migration only as a personal or African story would be to miss its broader significance. The truth is that every plane carrying African Americans back to Africa is also carrying a message to the United States and the wider world. The narrative of opportunity is shifting. For the U.S., the departure of its own citizens, especially those educated, skilled, and deeply motivated, signals cracks in the myth of the American dream. If talented professionals, hardworking families, and retirees are choosing to start over thousands of miles away, it means something deeper than economics. It is a referendum on whether America has truly lived up to its promise of equality. Policymakers in Washington may not admit it, but the movement is a warning sign, a quiet vote of no confidence. Internationally, the ripple effects are undeniable. In Paris and London, the specter of return migration touches raw nerves. These capitals, once centers of empire that extracted labor and resources from Africa, now watch as the descendants of the displaced walk away from Western systems and reinvest in Africa. It is as if the moral ledger of history is shifting one passport stamp at a time. The West's anxiety is not just about people leaving it, is about what they are leaving behind: skills capital and a symbolic rejection of centuries of racial hierarchy. Africa, meanwhile, is experiencing the opposite momentum. Each returnee is like a spark in a dry field. They bring energy, connections, and credibility to international partnerships. A software developer returning to Lagos can bridge American networks with African innovation. A teacher relocating to Accra may inspire new curriculum models blending African history with diaspora experience. This cross-pollination makes Africa not just a place of heritage, but a place of cutting-edge opportunity. Global investors are paying attention. When thousands of Americans willingly relocate to Africa, it reshapes how markets perceive the continent. Suddenly, Africa is not framed solely as a charity case or a crisis zone, but as a destination of choice. In boardrooms from New York to Shanghai, questions emerge if African Americans see Africa as the future. Shouldn't global capital follow? Even in geopolitics, the shift is clear. Diaspora returnees act as informal ambassadors, weaving new transatlantic networks that bypass traditional gatekeepers. A business in Atlanta might partner with a startup in Nairobi. A university in Chicago might exchange students with a school in Ouagadougou. These are not charity links. They are collaborations of equals. Over time, they tilt the balance of influence away from Western capitals and toward African ones. From the U.S. perspective, this trend is uncomfortable. From Africa's perspective, it is empowering. And from a global perspective, it is transformative. The flow of people and ideas back into Africa challenges centuries of assumptions about where progress, wealth, and leadership must come from. It recenters Africa on the global map, not as an afterthought, but as a future hub of humanity. In the end, the return migration is not simply about African Americans finding a new home. It is about the world recalibrating to a new reality. The next chapter of global history may well be written in Africa, with the diaspora holding the pen. The return of African Americans to Africa is not a passing story. It is a tide gathering strength, and like any tide, it reshapes the shorelines it touches. For America, each departure is a quiet alarm bell, a system that forces its own citizens to look elsewhere for dignity and opportunity cannot remain unchallenged forever. The longer those cracks are ignored, the wider they will spread. If the United States cannot answer the call for justice at home, it risks losing not only people but also moral authority on the world stage. For Africa, the warning is different. Opportunity comes with responsibility. Welcoming the diaspora is not enough. Governments must ensure that integration benefits locals and returnees alike. Land disputes, housing costs, and cultural adjustments must be handled with wisdom and fairness. If leaders embrace this movement as a foundation for unity and growth, it will become one of the greatest chapters in Pan-African history. But if they fail, resentment could grow and the chance for a true rebirth may be lost. Yet the bigger picture is hopeful. This migration is not just about economics or even identity, it is about redemption. Centuries ago, African sons and daughters were torn from their homeland in chains. Today, their descendants return by choice, carrying skills, investments, and visions for the future. That alone is historic. It turns exile into return, loss into gain, and trauma into possibility. And here is where the story touches us all. Whether you live in Atlanta, Chicago, Paris, Accra, Nairobi, or Ouagadougou, the question is the same. What kind of future do we want to build? One chained to old systems of inequality, or one born from unity, resilience, and dignity? Do you believe that President Ibrahim Traore's vision for a sovereign Africa, one where dignity, opportunity, and belonging are no longer luxuries but rights, represents that future? Or do you think another leader must step forward to carry the torch? The choice is not only for African Americans considering relocation, it is for all of us who must decide whether to support a rising Africa or to cling to the myths of a fading empire. So here is the call: if this story stirred something inside you, don't let it fade. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. And most of all, add your voice in the comments below. Because whether you are in New York, Accra, or anywhere in between, this is not just their story, it is our story. And the next chapter is waiting to be written.